Hey YouTube, this is Kevin. One of the folks on a string of one of my videos, Lisa R, asked me about the flat Earth paradigm, and I thought I would share some of my sort of genesis in looking at this and reopening the story of our cosmology, our home, where we live, and it becomes a really interesting mystery story. I'm 51. A year and a half ago, I guess, I came upon some information that's on the web. A couple things that hit me first in this paradigm shift for me. I was watching a video like I do sometimes on YouTube, and there was a Joe Rogan rant where Joe Rogan went off on the moon landing as a hoax. And he had an awesome rant. I'll attach that into this because it was hilarious. Now Joe Rogan's come back out and sort of debunked himself, and I can get into reasons why, but I'll let that go for now. But he did an awesome rant, and then it introduced me to a video called "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon," which gets into the creation of the original ball Earth photo from one of the Apollo missions. I believe it was Apollo 11. And that became the quintessential reason why many people believe that we live on a ball, that the Earth is a spinning orb that's rotating through the solar system and ultimately through infinite space. Okay? It started a train of thought of just going, oh, okay, I need to reopen this thing. Because I've always been kind of a skeptic. 9/11 got to me. I had a video on 9/11. I won't spend a lot of time here, but I'm in the financial services business. I live in New Jersey. I knew and worked with people who were in the towers. I had friends and family who were there. I had childhood acquaintance who died. My brother had a close friend who died in 9/11. And to me, 9/11 was a very startling and ultimately orchestrated event against us as a kind of form of psychological warfare. So that kind of, among other things, had set the stage for me to be skeptical and be willing to look at things that we're being told not to look at, I guess. You know, like when they did with the Kennedy assassination, they try to tell people not to look at it. So I've always been a natural skeptic, but I had never really revisited the paradigm of where we live because it didn't matter to me. I'm in financial services. I'm not a physical sciences teacher of any kind. So I was like, all right, I'm willing to look at things and I'm willing to be open-minded. And that's one of the key things. You need to be willing to be open-minded and know that you've been told a story that you may believe. And you've been given reasons to believe it. So I'm not going to say that you don't have reasons to believe this paradigm of the heliocentric model, which is also attached to a specific cosmology and creation story known as the Big Bang. So they're going to get lumped together into the ball paradigm, into the heliocentric model. Now, Helios is a Greek god, and he plays a role in this. So there's another name for him. It's called Apollo, but so there's this kind of nuances to this story. So the way it kind of went for me is I first learned about the possibility that NASA was faking and staging some of these video and photographic footage of the Earth from space. So that's like, well, okay, if they didn't go to the moon, what does that mean? And around the same time, there was a rapper, his name is B.O.B., had gotten into kind of a war on the web with a guy named Neil deGrasse Tyson, because Bob started coming out going, I don't believe we live on a ball. I believe we live, that the Earth is flat. And I would say the Earth is a plane with varied topography. I'm not going to say that it's flat because it's not. Although water seeks level, and most of the habitable area of where we live, which could be demonstrated by this map, so you have the continents and then you have blue ocean, and that water seeks level and is level. So you could say that the Earth is flat, but it's not really because of the temperature and pressure changes in the tides, the water moves. But it does seek level. So I went from looking at the globe to looking at this paradigm shift for me of Bob was talking about it and opened it up. I started looking at it. I started thinking about it for myself. And then I found something called the 200 Proofs by Eric Dubay. Eric Dubay had looked at something called zetetic astronomy, and a couple different guys, but there's a guy named Robotham who back in the 1800s, when one group of scientists was saying one thing, that their astronomy led them to believe that we lived in a ball, there were other physical scientists, surveyors and canal builders and railroad builders and other physical engineers and stuff that were saying the Earth is a plane. It's not, it's not a ball and it's not spinning. So you had these two groups, one led by astronomy and one led by the physical sciences, and they ultimately had very different viewpoints about where we live. So it's kind of been an ongoing debate that the NASA moonshots killed, but when we go, well, they may be faked or hoaxed, all right, that opens something else. So a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. They pretended to take a picture of the Earth and then said it was a ball. So you can look at that video, and that's really interesting because it's done as a documentary, and it goes into the astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins, and how they responded after they supposedly walked on the moon. And there are people like Antonio Subirats who show you what the lunar escape module looks like, and you can go down the rabbit hole of just that one thing. Did we land on the moon? Was it plausible? Do we have the technology? Do we have the ability? Could we recreate that mission today? And currently the answer is no. Certainly by NASA. And if you look at Don Pettit, one of their NASA scientists, he said no. So there's this whole first foot in the door of saying, okay, they don't have a picture of what the Earth looks like because they've been faked. And there are people who believe that everything they're putting out, and even by NASA's own admission, they CGI all this stuff. And then a guy named Matt Powerland comes in. Matt Powerland's situation is he was one of the first people that came out and said that he's a photorealistic painter, and he was hired by NASA to give these depictions of what they claim the new planets and the Earth will look like from their gazing up at the lights in the sky and claiming they know exactly what all of these things look like. And again, there's a whole other rabbit hole about looking at where they got the information that leads them to create these visualizations of the Earth.
Sorry.
I'm right in the middle of a video. Go away.
Don't show.
Okay. So, looking at that, you go, okay, these aren't photos. They're CGI images. Excuse me. My son came in and I sneezed. They're not photographs. They're CGI, and with all the things they can do with CGI, watch any movie. Watch the Transformers, and you can watch Optimus Prime running down the street, battling it out with the Decepticons, turning back into a truck and rolling away with Bumblebee. So they could do a lot with hoaxing images today, but they didn't have the technology back in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And now we have all these computer programs that can do forensic investigation into photos and video images and can determine whether or not they're authentic. So there's a whole other group that's been debunking NASA's images. So that's one whole thing. So you got to take that out and go, okay, question mark over NASA, pretty sure they're just a bunch of liars. That's for me. You come to your own conclusions, as always. So then I went into Eric Dubay's situation where he shows 200 proofs that the Earth is not a spinning ball. And he had a PDF copy of his book online that was available for free that I downloaded, and I went through, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is crazy. Because you think it's crazy because you've been told your whole life one thing, and then if it turns out you need to reinvestigate it, you need to open it up, you're going to need to be willing to go, okay, is this true or not? And since we've been so heavily programmed since childhood, it can be very hard to overcome our natural resistance to, wow, that's just crazy. And we've been taught to think it's crazy. It's constantly reinforced within movies, TV, and popular culture that it's become a sacred cow that you can't question, which seems kind of strange considering you've never been to space, and I've never been to space, and we haven't been up there to look at it ourselves, and there's a very good chance that nobody's been to space. So that kind of changes the thing. If you just go, okay, if you haven't been to space and I haven't been to space, then it should be open for debate. And then you start the exploration process. So in his 200 proofs, you start to have to go, okay, what are the physical observations? And I looked at like the Suez Canal is 102 miles long. And, you know, based on the calculation that you can do on the Earth curvature. So the trigonometry of a ball with a circumference of 25,000 miles approximately is 8 inches per mile squared. So if you take 100 times 100 times 8, so that's, you know, the squaring of the miles is 100 miles and 8 inches, and then you divide it by 12 inches so you can get it into feet, what you come up with is 6,666.6667 feet. So the Suez Canal should have something over like a mile and a quarter. A mile is 5,280 feet. So the Suez Canal, which is perfectly level and has no locks, should have over 6,800 feet of curvature, a mile and a quarter or more of curvature. So you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. So you can do this whole thing of saying, if the Earth is a ball, it's going to need to have two things. It's going to need to show curvature, and if it's a spaceship that's rotating and orbiting through space, we're going to need to know that we can prove that it's actually in motion, that there's physical ramifications for an orbital rotating body. Okay? But you'll notice that the 6,666, when you take the Earth and you make it rotate at over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, because that's what they say causes that, you know, the sun rising and setting is done by the Earth rotating in the heliocentric paradigm. But then they say at the same time the Earth is then orbiting the sun in our 365 point whatever, you know, leap year. And that's what gives us the seasons, because we're on an angle. So two things. So the Earth is allegedly moving around the sun at 66,667 miles per hour. The same numbers come up again. And then it's on a 23.4 degree tilt. That's what causes the seasons. And you can see people are going to show you all this online. On both sides. People who believe the heliocentric model and people who don't. Excuse me. And so then you can say those numbers came up again, because 23.4 out of 90 is actually 66 degrees again. So the 666, you start to look at these occult numbers and you start to go, who were these scientists that were coming up with this stuff? Was it really science, or is it occult magic mathematics? And that's kind of what led me down a whole other trail. So you have the two investigations here. One is, what can I see and experience? What can I prove? What is the natural sciences telling us today? Versus, what are the cosmological sciences telling us? Astronomy is attached to a cosmology, which is attached to a Genesis story and the creation mythos. For one group, you have the Big Bang occurred some godzillion years ago, and that all the stars are gazillion miles away. And all of this life and creation of all the mysterious, you know, beings and bugs and plants and the Earth and the planets and the stars, all this stuff came together as a result of happenstance and an explosion, again, a gazillion years ago. On the other side, you have natural scientists and usually religious people who believe in a more divine design creation cosmology that also goes back to like Genesis in the Bible and the ancient religions like the Vedas and the Mayans and the Hebrews and in the Quran. A lot of these religious traditions have a cosmology that includes us as being divinely created, which is kind of interesting. I didn't realize that the Big Bang Theory had created a lot of atheists, and in me it created a plausible story for why there may be aliens. And that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down, which I'm not going to in this video. Okay, because I'm trying to give you the path that my mind took as I started to investigate the paradigm. I drive over bridges routinely for my job, and I started looking out at the horizon. I started exploring it for myself. I started going, can I identify curvature? And what people do is, because they'll tell you, well, it's too big for you to see the curvature. And you go, okay. So what people do in reverse is they go, well, what should I not be able to see if the Earth were a ball? And then there's a very famous photograph of Chicago from across Lake Michigan, 62 miles away, and Chicago should have been pretty much below the horizon. And then they'll start to tell you stories like, what you're seeing is a mirage, which is literally what a broadcaster said. Like, he was a weatherman when he tried to claim why this mirage could have been possible. What you find is a mirage is typically an inverted image of something reflecting off of the atmosphere, because the atmosphere has lensing and reflective capabilities. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff that you're going to be able to explore if you haven't looked at it. And what it does is it can get you back in touch with not only your curiosity for the physical world in which we live, which to me a lot of that stuff's put to sleep when everybody goes, we got it figured out, bro. You know, we know exactly what happened. Something exploded. We're not quite sure what, but CERN's working on it, trying to figure it out, finding a God particle. We're going to figure it out. And at the same time, go to sleep, because we're the masters of science. You're not smart enough to figure this out for yourself. You need us to tell you how it is. So they become like the high priests of knowledge. And that's very old, isn't it? So you have these, on the other side, I found when I was having conversations in some of the posts on different videos, I would get into like debates with people about different things, and people, you know, kind of attack you. And a lot of times you find they start to ridicule. One of the things that I thought was very interesting is I didn't mention the Bible. I didn't even actually know what the Bible said. And I've only found out recently, maybe 6 months ago, what the Bible said about the earth and how it came to be and what it is, and all this kind of stuff. People would attack me for being religious and for being Christian. Now, I consider myself a Christian, but I didn't consider that as necessary for me to explore the cosmology of and the shape and the size and all that kind of stuff of the earth. My son's on his way out of the shower now. I'll see you later, dude. Have fun.
See you, man.
So I thought it was weird that what I found is that the Big Bang cosmology created a lot of atheists. And I've always considered myself a spiritual person, so I didn't really see that it would have mattered to me. But it obviously mattered to them. And what it mattered to me more is I thought, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. I started to buy into the whole alien paradigm. Let me just take a little sidebar here and just share one thing for you. I understand how pernicious a belief system can be. I believed that there were aliens, and a lot of it came from infinite stars, infinite planets, watching movies, being told the possibility, watching the Ancient Alien show, which is the Never Finding Alien show, which is a lot like the Never Finding Bigfoot show, which I kind of joked about in that last video that I put up. They create a plausible story that's kind of easy to buy into. It's like a confidence game. They just kind of bring you in real slowly, and they give you some reasons that they don't really back up with fact. They kind of show you some things, or kind of like hearsay. And I remember one time I was on a debate kind of arguing about the monolithic stones and whether or not some of these monolithic stones could have been cut and laid by the people with the technology of the time, because it had to be the aliens that did it. And there was a guy in a string who was offering me proof that it was actually possible, because the Romans had technology and they had created their temples, and they had used, there were pictures of the mechanical devices they used to move the stones. So just because a technology is no longer in vogue doesn't mean that the people at the time didn't have the ability to do that. I mean, we have all these pyramids and stuff that are allegedly 10,000 years old, and they got put there by somebody. But in the Ancient Aliens, Big Bang, spinning balls, space methodology, it was aliens. But on our side, it is humans have a longer history. We were created. There's been different worlds, possibly the flood and all this kind of stuff. And there's a cosmology that's also linked to the ancient religious traditions and the ancient books and scholarly works from people of antiquity. And it kind of brings me all the way full circle until today. So I've spent a year and a half going through various videos of different subscribers online. You know, if you want to look at things from kind of a biblical perspective, there's a guy's name is Rob Skiba, and he goes into things that are kind of in the Bible. And these people all have varied interests. And what the paradigm and cosmology and Genesis story of the earth is a part of it for a lot of us, but there's many different rabbit holes that we go down. So there are all these different contributors that are going to lead you to all kinds of interesting discoveries. Now, I put on my neon blue shirt today because I remember being a kid playing baseball, looking up at the sky and wondering why the sky was blue and asking people, and they gave me lame reasons, which didn't really satisfy me. One of the contributors out here to the whole flat Earth paradigm, if you want to call it that, is a guy with a channel named Dan Dimensions. And Dan Dimensions on his channel showed experiments using xenon, argon, and neon. And neon in particular, when it's excited by electromagnetism, the photons released gives you light in the blue spectrum. So if we're living in more of a toroidal electromagnetic universe and not one ruled by gravity, then the electromagnetic properties of the sun and the moon then is what causes sky to be blue, because the lighter gases, the noble gases, which would be higher up in the atmosphere, are excited by the electromagnetic properties of the sun, moon, and possibly the firmament. That's where the sky is blue, which is something I only had just learned, which is very cool for me. There's another video I put on here under the string, under the answer to the questions you had, which was off of a channel called Globebusters. There's guys that were doing some experimentation with electromagnetism and water and ring magnets, and providing a plausible working model of the Earth, sun and the moon, and the sun and the moon rotating overhead. Can you see that visualizer there? This is the electromagnetism, the Ticket Laddie video. So they show how the Earth perhaps is a ring magnet, and it's not a spinning ball that's orbiting through space. So one of the things we want to kind of separate is, what can you experiment, prove, and verify, and what can't you? Like gravity, you can drop something and say, well, gravity brought that object to the ground. But if you had a helium balloon and you let it go, the helium balloon is going to rise. So gravity's not going to pull the balloon down. So then there's other properties of buoyancy and density that impact, whether or not something floats on water or in the air, whether it sinks and falls and all that kind of stuff. So there are other properties at work. But gravity, having other magical properties, is necessary for the Spaceballs paradigm. So gravity, this force that can't be measured, it can only be described, holds the Earth together and makes it spin, and it holds the moon in a tractor beam orbit, where they literally say it's like the moon is falling towards the Earth but continuously missing, which means the moon is falling towards the Earth but continuously missing, while the Earth and the moon are falling towards the sun and continuously missing because of the energy of the motion imparted to them from the Big Bang, which to me was the explosion that they used in the hearts and minds of the people to kill God. They were providing a materialistic paradigm to replace a spiritual divine cosmology. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not whether or not the Earth is a ball or whether it's a plane. It's whether or not there's a materialistic reason attached to happenstance that actually leads to nihilism and atheism. Or are we in a divinely created world with a divine designer? And what are the implications of that for humanity if we get back to an understanding that we do have a purpose, we do have a real cosmology, there is a creator, and what could this all be about if that is the case? So what I would find out on the strings, having debates with people about topics of observation, people would attack me for being a Christian when I had never mentioned it, and I would have never mentioned the Bible. Once I found out what the Bible was, what the Bible said about it, and once I found out who some of these people were on the other side, that they were not only atheists, some of them were actually Satanists. If you look up Jack Parsons from the Jack Parsons Laboratory, you'll find that he is a Satanist attached to Aleister Crowley. And once you know what their methodology is, to not just speak lies, but simply to invert the truth. That's why the pentagram is upside down. That's why the crosses are upside down. That's why they'll sometimes speak in reverse. So they take the truth and they invert it. Or in this case, they take the Bible story and they invert that, and then they backtest it. So the Bible says the Earth is a plane, it's motionless, and it's the center, and it was created by God in 7 days. Okay, it's a motionless place that is our universe. Square on pillars. And then you have the other cosmology, which says the Earth, all the space and universe was created a godzillion years ago, and it was an accident. And then the Earth is a ball instead of a plane that was square. Now it's a ball. In the one paradigm in the Bible, it's stationary, and in their paradigm, it's not only rotating, it's also orbiting, and then the whole thing is rotating and orbiting, and an ever-expanding universe. So you're not the center of that one. You're a meaningless speck on the outer arm of the Milky Way galaxy, which is just one of another gazillion number of galaxies. And then on this side you have, we were created by God. We're a divine creation in His image. And there are other levels and heavens and other things that are in the Bible, like God's house of many mansions could be the plane. And then you may have God's terrariums out here on the plane where you have habitable areas where life can prosper. I was out at the beach today, and I don't have any images of it, but I was sitting at the beach and you had this twilight sky, which was kind of pink, and then you had the ocean and how they meet off at the vanishing point, and you just had this beautiful scene of this magnificent ocean. And my brother was sitting next to me. He was like, you know, if you sit here, how can you question the existence of a God? That God created all this. And I think what you're going to find, like a lot of people do, is that there's more to this. You know, people go, why would they lie to us? Well, because that's what Satanists do. They lie. Or are they all Satanists? I don't know. Could be that there's a test for humanity. Could be they have other plans. Could be the same old elitist thing. They hold secrets, and that's part of their controlled paradigm. I think on a spiritual level, we all have an inherent bullshit detector. And if they can get you to believe enormous lies, then your bullshit detector is always going off, and then it's really hard to tell and discern the truth because your bullshit detector is being exhausted by continuous lies. Like, who taught parents to lie to their children on Christmas about Santa Claus? Who taught parents to lie to their children about the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny, which were Christian religious holidays that got taken over by secular holidays, where we ended up telling our children lies? You know, there's a whole other weird kind of rabbit hole you can go down with this. But you may want to start with looking at NASA and whether or not you believe them, because they're providing us the images of the Earth. You might want to look at yourself, your physical observations, and what you can discern. You know, you may want to look at the religious aspects of it, see what the Bible says, the Quran, the Hebrew text, the Vedas. There's some great image visualizations of how the Vedas believe. You know, there's a plane, and there are the seven heavens, and there's Mount Meru, and the various gods, and the creator Shiva and whatnot in their cosmology that you can look at. It is, at the very least, an amazing exploration. There's great contributors. I put some of them in that string for you. There's other guys like Santos Bonacci, who's an astrology guy, goes into all kind of cosmology stuff. Even like notables today, there's a guy from the Ubuntu movement. Oh my God, his name is escaping, but he just came out as a flat earther. David Wolf, who's a noted vegan author they call Mr. Avocado, he put out his reasons why he believes he's a flat earther. The flat earth paradigm movement is taking steam when people start observing the world for themselves and stop leaving it to the masters of science. So I hope you had some fun. Please, explore the paradigm for yourself. I'm happy to communicate with you, and have a great night. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.